deputies in Volusia County, Florida, were called to a home on Daytona Beach in January of 2014 after the owner of the property found a woman passed out. The weather at the time was unseasonably cold and temperatures stood at around 33 degrees due to a polar vortex in the north. The homeowner alerted the authorities after he'd come upon 28-year-old Candace Long on his porch. She was severely intoxicated and had a young boy with her who was barefoot, wearing only a t-shirt and urine-soaked shorts. When deputies arrived at the scene, Long was barely coherent and told them that she was drunk because it was her birthday. While she was being led away, she fell into a back porch fence and had to be helped up by deputies. Long had no idea from whence she'd come or who the child with her was. The police learned that the boy's family lived only a few blocks away. Long had reportedly been asked to watch him while his father ran errands, and she hadn't been given permission to leave the house with him. Long was charged with child neglect, and the media dubbed her the world's worst babysitter. In spite of her actions, the woman was seen smiling from ear to ear in her mugshot. Also visible was a wound to her right eye, for which, much like the rest of her solitary birthday celebrations, Long couldn't account. Number 7. Brin Speter. On May the 27th of 2018, California resident Brin Speter was at the Thousand Oaks home of Chad O'Melia, a man she'd been dating for a few weeks. At some point during the evening, Speter launched a frenzied attack on O'Melia. She plunged a serrated bread knife into his neck and proceeded to ravage his body, ultimately delivering roughly 108 knife strikes. The man died after suffering deep penetration to the heart, lungs, and carotid artery, with each of the stabs having the potential of being fatal. Speter also used the blade to brutally attack her own dog. When police officers arrived at the home the following morning, they found Speter screaming hysterically next to O'Melia's blood-soaked body. Body cam footage from the scene would show the woman with multiple bleeding cuts to her face and neck, the healed marks of which were visible in her mugshot. Officers were only able to get Speter to surrender the blade after delivering at least 9 strikes with their retractable batons and deploying a taser on her. In court, witnesses stated that the attack was completely out of character for Speter, whom they described as a non-violent person. Multiple experts testified with a high degree of certainty that she'd experienced cannabis-induced psychosis. Noting that the woman appeared to be possessed in body cam footage, it emerged that leading up to O'Melia's gruesome killing, the man had pressured Speter to try some of his cannabis. She was a novice smoker who'd done the drug only a handful of times in the past. She took a few puffs, but reportedly felt nothing, at which point O'Melia offered her something more intense. The woman took 2 hits from his bong, the second of which caused her to experience an immediate negative reaction. She rushed to the bathroom with blurry vision, breathing problems, and felt like she was dying. According to court testimony from the fall of 2023, Speter had an out-of-body experience in which she saw emergency staff working on her body as she lay dying. She then heard voices pushing her towards violence and telling her that she had to kill O'Melia to bring herself back to life. THC, the psychoactive chemical in marijuana, is known to cause an imbalance in the brain that typically induces a feel-good sensation, but it has also been linked to serious mental health problems such as psychosis and schizophrenia. Experts noted a sharp increase in the THC content of cannabis-based products, as it nearly quadrupled from 4% in 1995 to 17% by 2017, thus increasing the likelihood of users experiencing adverse effects. Further attesting to Speter's level of impairment at the time of the incident was the fact that she'd stabbed her dog without having exhibited any previous signs of animal cruelty tendencies. She and O'Melia had actually met at a dog park and bonded over their shared love of animals. 32-year-old Speter, who in one hearing was seen crying in court while holding a photo of her dog, was initially charged with second-degree murder, but according to updates from December of 2023, she was convicted of involuntary manslaughter. The charge typically carried a sentence of up to 4 years in state prison, although several enhancements in Speech's case meant that she faced a potentially longer sentence. Number 6. Brian Maguire. Law enforcement in Niagara Falls, New York, pulled over Brian Maguire on Mayflower Road in January of 2015 after the man had reportedly failed to keep right. During their interaction with him, officers noted that he smelled strongly of alcohol. Maguire refused to submit to a breathalyzer and failed field sobriety tests, resulting in his arrest for DWI. While he was being processed at the station, Maguire chose to emphasize his disdain for law enforcement. The 26-year-old man stuck his tongue out just as his booking photo was being taken. The end result was what many on the internet would describe as a strong candidate for Mugshot of the Year. Number 5. Haley Ord. At around 10 p.m. on September the 10th of 2022, Englishwoman Haley Ord was stopped by law enforcement on the A59 County Road in Walton, Liverpool, for driving without insurance. Officers detected the smell of cannabis and requested a roadside drug wipe, to which Ord tested positive. After the 41-year-old woman was taken into custody, she agreed to provide a blood sample, which would reveal she had 4.7 micrograms of THC per liter of blood, more than twice the drug drive limit. Ord cried at Sefton Magistrates Court as she pleaded guilty to driving with THC in her blood and driving without insurance. She admitted to having taken the drug earlier on the day of her arrest to self-medicate her anxiety and mistakenly believed that it would be out of her system. In January of 2023, Ord was fined and disqualified from driving for 12 months. The decision was expected to affect the woman's ability to take her 5-year-old daughter to school, while Ord also ran the risk of losing a job she'd recently found as a teaching assistant, given that she would face difficulty getting to work. The sentencing judge, however, sternly stated, "Cannabis is illegal, that's the end of it," before pointing out that with a concentration more than twice the legal limit in her system, Ord had been in no condition to drive. Number 4. Matthew Clemens. In May of 2010, Matthew Clemens, aged 21, pleaded guilty to 1 count of simple assault, disorderly conduct, and harassment for his actions during an April the 14th baseball game between the Phillies and the Nationals while at Citizens Bank Park in Philadelphia. Clemens and a friend were intoxicated and belligerent. Sitting in front of them were Michael Vangello, an off-duty Eastern Police captain, and his 2 daughters, one of whom was a teenager and the other in her preteens. Vangello complained to security that the 2 men were spilling beer, cursing, and heckling them. Clemens' friend was ejected from the stadium after he was accused of spitting on one of Vangello's daughters. Once he was left alone behind the family, the intoxicated Clemens decided to exact revenge on them. He was overheard answering a phone call and saying, "I need to do what I need to do. I'm going to get sick." In the moments that followed, he stuck his fingers down his throat and vomited on Vangello, with some of the ejected material also hitting his younger daughter. Clemens then punched the police captain in the head multiple times before he was subdued by other fans in the stands. He yelled out expletives at the crowd as he was thrown out of the stadium. Clemens was shown with a black and swollen eye in his mugshot, which law enforcement reported that he'd sustained while he was being subdued. As news of the incident spread, Clemens was dubbed Vomit Man and Pukemon on the internet and in the media following his guilty plea. He was sentenced to 1 to 3 months in jail, 2 years of probation, and 50 hours of community service. Number 3. Roger Scheid. Florida man Roger Scheid was arrested at his Key Largo home in the fall of 2017 for firing his weapons in the air in broad daylight while severely inebriated. His neighbors called 911, and officers from the Monroe County Police Department rushed to the scene at around 1 p.m. on a Tuesday. They found the front and back doors to Scheid's home open and ordered him to come out. Shia emerged, still drunk and fully naked. After he was taken into custody, law enforcement discovered a fully loaded shotgun on the bed in one of the bedrooms and a loaded .45 caliber handgun on a pile of clothing. Spent casings were also found at the home. Shia gave the police conflicting stories regarding the gunshots coming from his house, initially telling them that he'd been cleaning his guns when they went off, and then claiming that he wanted to check if the weapons worked. He was charged with firing a weapon while under the influence of alcohol and unlawful discharge of a firearm. Today's topic was requested by JLIU7FK. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below. Number 2. Incident in Austin. In the spring of 2016, a social media clip of an incident that occurred in the neighborhood of Austin, Texas, showed a naked man in an advanced state of intoxication as he was interacting with local police. A description of the video posted by user said this happened, detailed that the man had attacked their mailman and eaten a tax form. He was then pepper sprayed by the mail carrier, and the uploader began recording after the intoxicated man had been subdued by responding law enforcement. He was handcuffed and fully naked with the exception of a high-visibility jacket which had been placed on him to cover his privates. Between bouts of uncontrolled laughter and hysterical screaming, the man made several bizarre statements while surrounded by police officers. One of them was, "I'm sentient, I'm alive." He also pondered, "What color is pink?" adding, "Pink is a hell of a drug," and saying that he snorted a lot of pink. He also said that 911 was not a prime number and asked the police to tell him a joke and to turn the temperature down. Other rambling outbursts included, "There is no God," and him saying, "F black people." He began violently shaking his head, and while he was loaded onto a stretcher to be placed in an ambulance, he asked, "Am I Merlin?" The man's condition and charges remained unclear. Multiple users reacting to the clip pointed to his state at the time of the arrest as a prime example for why people should avoid illegal substances. In tune with their line of thought, the video's uploader stated in the description, "Don't do drugs, or if you do, don't do bath salts." Right after number 1, we will line up our compilation from a while back about when going off the handle goes wrong, for those of you who can't get enough of our videos. Number 1. Andrew Adamson. On December the 3rd of 2023, newlywed couple Jared and Kristen Huddleston were driving on Chisholm Trail Parkway in Fort Worth, Texas. 42-year-old Jared and Kristen, aged 35, were both veterans of the United States Marine Corps, and they were reportedly returning from a reunion with other Marines. Their SUV was struck on the parkway by 27-year-old Andrew Adamson, who was intoxicated and driving the wrong way. The aftermath of the devastating impact was visible in photos taken at the scene, which showed both vehicles bearing extensive damage. Jared and Kristen were pronounced dead at the scene, while Adamson was taken to the hospital with injuries that weren't deemed life-threatening. He was later seen in his mugshot with black eyes and a swollen face. Adamson was charged with vehicular manslaughter while under the influence. The newlyweds were survived by children that each of them had from previous relationships, and a GoFundMe was started by relatives to help them. Leading up to her death, Kristen was working towards becoming a therapist as she wanted to help veterans adjust to civilian life. Speaking of his daughter's relationship, Kristen's grieving father told the media they were happy. "That's the happiest I've seen my daughter as an adult. They're still happy together. Couldn't separate them." Number 8. Demi Burton. In May of 2019, a young British woman wrought havoc on a flight from Abu Dhabi to her native Manchester, and it took multiple people to restrain her. 20-year-old Demi Burton's chain of inappropriate outbursts began when she propositioned several male flyers to join her in the Mile High Club while intoxicated on red wine. When she was denied more alcohol, Burton demanded to see the captain. That request was also denied, at which point she raised her fist in front of a flight attendant, reportedly shouting that they should land the plane. a violent struggle ensued in which it took 6 passengers and cabin crew members to restrain the young woman. A consultant anesthetist was bitten on the elbow and headbutted by her, and would later refer to the experience as being worse than working in the ER. Burton also headbutted a flight attendant and bit her on the forearm. Others sustained kicks to the ribs and face. She continued to act disruptively after being restrained, but began to tire out and calmed down after a passenger, who was a prison warden, had a talk with her. Burton was arrested at the end of the 8-hour flight and subsequently jailed for 6 months on various charges that included 5 counts of assault. Number 7. Unnamed Russian woman. In 2021, a Russian passenger was tied to her seat with rope, duct tape, and a seat belt after taking off her clothes while wandering aimlessly around the cabin. Shortly after the plane had departed from Vladivostok, the unnamed 39-year-old woman got up from her seat, displaying erratic behavior. She started removing articles of clothing, including her underwear, and then putting them back on again. Cabin crew had repeatedly asked her to stop, but she ignored them entirely, fearing for her own safety as well as that of other travelers. The plane's crew teamed up with some of the passengers to restrain the woman in her seat. She remained tied up for the rest of the flight and was arrested after the plane landed in Novosibirsk. Upon questioning, she admitted taking a synthetic drug prior to boarding the plane and faced low-level charges of petty hooliganism. Number 6. Vitali. In 2017, a heavily inebriated Russian man exhibited threatening behavior on a flight from Moscow to Barcelona. Only identified as Vitali, the 22-year-old wanted to smoke a cigarette on the plane and became enraged when the flight crew told him it wasn't allowed. He started screaming and insulting the Russian people, even though he was also Russian. Fed up with the verbal abuse, one passenger approached Vitali and punched him square on the chin. It was at that point that he sat down and promptly fell asleep. The pilot was reportedly on the verge of making a forced landing, but then abandoned that course of action once Vitali calmed down. It's unclear what legal action Vitali or the passenger that had hit him faced, but the former did apologize for his behavior. One passenger was quoted as saying, "Shame that he got punched only once." Number 5. Unnamed Chicago women. In March of 2021, a brawl broke out at Florida's Fort Lauderdale Hollywood International Airport. It happened after 2 women who refused to wear their masks forced an entire cabin to deboard. In spite of the clear pandemic safety guidelines, the passengers chose to keep their masks off. As the police escorted them through the gate, they were booed and mocked by frustrated passengers. The pair became more irate as they walked through the crowd. They ultimately got into an argument with another group of women. One of the alleged anti-maskers taunted a woman from the opposing side to hit her. A fight broke out with them striking each other and various items flying about. One of the women ended up on the ground with the other, choking her and pulling on her hair. The fight was stopped by the police and everyone involved was detained and led out of the terminal. Number 4. Landon Greer. In March of 2021, an Alaska Airlines passenger faced a maximum term of 20 years in prison, as well as a $250,000 fine for interfering with the flight crew and attendants, considered a federal charge. 24-year-old Landon Greer was flying from Seattle to Denver, but before boarding, he'd had a few beers and several shots. During the flight, a passenger called an attendant to Greer's seat as he had urinated on himself. Other crew members arrived to assess the situation and repeatedly told Greer to wear his mask. It was at that point that he struck one of them. He would later tell the FBI that he had no memory of urinating in his seat or of swatting the attendant, and that he'd awoken to the attendant shouted at him about the mask. Greer was arrested and later released on a $10,000 bond. Number 3. Luton Airport Brawl. In May of 2021, a massive brawl broke out at London Luton Airport that ended with 3 people being hospitalized. It began as an exchange of words between women in the group, most of whom were Romanian nationals, with their ages ranging from 20 to 55. After a man insulted one of the women, he was struck in the back of the head with a bottle thrown at him by another male passenger. As the fight broke out, the men started punching, kicking, and hitting each other with suitcases in the airport's shopping area. They clambered over the chairs and one of them tried to use a bin as a weapon, but then discarded it. Surveillance footage captured one man being repeatedly stomped on as he lay on the ground. Passengers that weren't involved in the altercation shouted at them to stop in a brawl that lasted around 5 minutes, until security finally intervened. In the aftermath, 17 people were arrested, 11 of whom were charged. A spokesman for Luton Airport apologized to bystanders who were affected by the brawl and reaffirmed the airport's zero-tolerance policy towards such incidents. Number 2. Khloe Haynes. In June of 2019, a British passenger was accused of causing absolute chaos in the sky on an airplane bound for Turkey. Since the plane was still on the runway, 25-year-old Khloe Haynes had reportedly been hurling verbal abuse at other passengers while downing a bottle of gin. She then sent a cabin crew member flying across the aisle. With the plane at a cruising altitude of about 30,000 feet, Haynes ran to the front and tried to open one of the emergency exits, screaming, "I am going to kill you all." Former security guard Steve Brown tackled her and then pinned her down with the help of other passengers. Haynes continued to punch and kick them as they tried to restrain her. They eventually put an end to the rampage that had endangered the lives of the 206 passengers aboard the plane. However, by that point, the pilots had already raised the alarm. Sonic booms echoed across the East Coast as 2 RAF Typhoon fighters arrived at either side of the passenger plane and guided it back to Stansted. Haynes was arrested but claimed she didn't remember much of the incident after mixing alcohol with medication. She was given a jail sentence of 2 years. Number 1. Brawl at Miami International. In April of 2021, several passengers started fighting each other at Miami International Airport over the lack of seats on a flight to Chicago. At the American Airlines terminal, 20-year-old Jamil Tremaine, DeQueer, and 3 others were told that only 3 standby seats were available. DeQueer's group was given a choice of catching a later flight together or of one of them staying behind. The gate agent then asked 3 other passengers if they wanted the seats, and a verbal confrontation ensued between them and DeQueer's group. The argument turned physical, and 2 separate brawls broke out with the standby passengers repeatedly punching and kicking each other. One of the men ended up on the floor and covered a woman with his body as they were repeatedly stomped on. After the fight was broken up by other passengers, Miami-Dade police arrived at the scene and remained there for more than an hour, but none of the 7 wanted to press charges. One victim was treated at the airport for injuries sustained in the fight, while DeQueer was arrested for disorderly conduct. Number 9. Oscar Mayorga. An officer of the Apopka Police Department in Florida was found drinking behind the wheel on July the 4th of 2022 while he was on duty. 25-year-old Oscar Mayorga's colleagues caught up with him after a resident had reported spotting his cruiser running stop signs and swerving erratically. The officers asked the uniformed Mayorga to roll down his window and immediately detected a strong odor of alcohol emanating from him. Body cam footage showed the bleary-eyed man as he was being questioned by fellow law enforcement officers. He claimed that he was on his way to work and admitted that he'd been drinking, with police discovering that he was roughly 5 times over the legal limit. Mayorga explained that his thought process had been centered on leaving a gap of several hours between having the drinks and starting his shift, believing he'd sober up. The officers, however, also spotted an open beer can in the center cup holder of his cruiser. Mayorga was eventually put on a stretcher and taken away in an ambulance for medical treatment. In the aftermath, he was charged with a DUI and suspended without pay. Number 8. Jessica Mary O'Brien. On July the 13th of 2018, an unnamed man from Brisbane, Australia, had his clothes set on fire by his enraged girlfriend following a bender involving prescription pills and alcohol. Jessica May O'Brien, then in her late 20s, was at a Kangaroo Point apartment complex with her then partner, reported as being 17 years her senior. The couple, whose relationship was described as often volatile, shared several bottles of wine, and O'Brien also took Prozac tablets. An argument eventually erupted after the woman had phoned a male friend. As tensions escalated, O'Brien threw her boyfriend's wallet from the balcony, to which he retaliated by launching her phone over. After the man had left the apartment to calm down, O'Brien set fire to some of his clothes before leaving the unit. The barefooted woman encountered 2 strangers on her way out of the complex and told them to call the fire brigade. They'd later report that she was slurring her words and seemed off her face, in reference to her advanced state of intoxication. She also allegedly offered one of them $10,000 if they'd help her flee. O'Brien went to her ex-husband's Ash Grove house and found that the man wasn't home. She broke in and slept in his bed before the police eventually tracked her down and took her into custody. The New Zealand-born woman, who had a history of mental health issues, ultimately avoided jail time for her drunken rampage and was given a 12-month intensive correction order. Number 7. Gary Anderson. In May of 2019, Florida man Gary Anderson drove an electric-powered lawnmower which had a trailer attached to it on a highway leading up to Haines City. At some point, the heavily intoxicated 68-year-old lost control of the lawn trimmer and crashed into a police cruiser which had no occupants, inflicting minor damage to its bumper. Anderson had twice been convicted of DUI in the past, and his driver's license had been suspended since 1978. When he was eventually confronted by law enforcement, Anderson's attitude reportedly ranged from laughing to aggressive, and he collapsed to the ground multiple times. His bender had been fueled by a cooler with drinks, which was found in his trailer. And he eventually admitted being intoxicated, telling an officer, "I'm drunk, take me to jail." After failing to take field sobriety tests, Anderson was transported to Heart of Florida Regional Medical Center, where his blood alcohol was found to be 3 times the legal limit. Cocaine was also discovered in his system, but the man accused one of the arresting officers of having poisoned him with it while using profanities and racial slurs. Number 6. Bayan Mutlu. In the fall of 2021, Turkish man Bayan Mutlu went on a bender with several of his friends in the northwestern province of Bursa. After downing a few drinks, the 50-year-old Inagol resident wandered into nearby woods. A few hours had passed with the man's wife unable to find or contact him, and she became concerned. As he roamed the forest trying to find his way back, Mutlu came upon a group of rescuers who'd been looking for a missing person. The inebriated man decided to join the search party, unaware that he was in fact the person they'd been tasked with finding. He'd inadvertently begun searching for himself, and the group only realized it when someone shouted out his name. Mutlu replied, "I'm here," from within the search party, and the error became clear. One of the rescue workers took his statement before giving him a lift home, but it wasn't clear if he was reprimanded for his actions. Number 5. Incident in Bangkok. In November of 2016, a commuter in Bangkok, Thailand, captured a couple in the midst of a street confrontation which subsequently went viral. Neither of those involved was named, but witnesses reported that the argument had been centered on the man having gone on a bender. In the morning, as he was nursing his hangover with some street food, he was confronted by his wife, who was wielding a machete. The woman ordered him in the car after she'd berated him for going out and partying all night long. She pointed the blade at her spouse and also struck him in the midsection with the flat side as he struggled to come to grips with the situation. The broad daylight incident, which was subsequently covered by international press outlets, concluded with the man getting into the car's front passenger seat. Number 4. Stephen Thomas Caressel and Richard Brenton Melby. 2 college lacrosse players from Orange County, California, were arrested on suspicion of theft in April of 2016 after kidnapping a turkey and taking it on a bender. Stephen Thomas Caressel and Richard Brenton Melby, both in their early 20s, had taken the 5-year-old turkey named Tim from the agricultural area of the Orange High School, where students were taught how to take care of animals. Tim, an American heritage slate turkey, was considered a threatened species, and students raised the alarm when they realized he was missing. When the animal was found, it had trouble breathing, reeked of beer, was covered in a sticky black substance, and missing most of its chest and tail feathers. During the kidnapping, Tim reportedly suffered a punctured esophagus, which left him unable to properly digest his food. He struggled for months, but was eventually put down. Days after his death, Caressel and Melby pleaded guilty to a misdemeanor count of entering an animal enclosure without consent. As indicated by court records, they were ordered to serve 1 day in jail, 100 hours of community service, and paid $223 in restitution to the Saddleback Animal Hospital, where Tim had been treated. Number 3. Joachim Robin Bergren. Swedish man Joachim Robin Bergren caused a citywide panic in Barcelona after going on a bender and stealing a truck carrying gas cylinders in February of 2017. Bergren had flown into the country from Russia a day before the incident and checked into a hotel with the intention of leaving for Madrid on the same day. Local media reported that at the last minute, Bergren changed his mind and decided to take advantage of the Catalan city's vibrant nightlife. He went on a bender that bank statements indicated had cost him over $20,000 and allegedly involved escorts, alcohol, and illegal substances. The man then went on a drunken rampage through the city the following morning. He tried stopping several vehicles and stealing a motorbike before he ultimately got behind the wheel of a truck laden with gas canisters. The driver had left the keys in the ignition, and 32-year-old Bergren started driving the truck on the wrong side of the road, leading local authorities on a 2-mile chase. Witnesses reported that the man was laughing like a maniac during the pursuit, and concerns arose that the city was facing an extremist attack. Officers fired 7 shots at the truck, bringing it to a halt, and then took Bergren into custody. They eventually learned that the man hadn't been carrying out a planned attack and admitted him to a psychiatric care center. In October of 2017, he was given a fine of over $1,000, along with a 2-year suspended sentence, and allowed to return home. Number 2. Earl Lee Johnson. In April of 2022, an unnamed social media user stumbled upon a gruesome video on Facebook Live that showed a woman being bound and stabbed. The user reported the video to Facebook, and the company alerted the authorities. The victim was identified as 34-year-old Janice David, and her naked body was found in a partially torched BMW 5 Series by law enforcement in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. As later reported by investigators, she and local man Earl Lee Johnson had reportedly been on a drug bender for several days. At some point, 35-year-old Johnson became enraged and accused David of stealing his belongings and trying to flee from him. He tied her to the BMW steering wheel and then live-streamed the torment to which he subjected her. In one portion of the footage, the shirtless man ranted into the camera about the alleged theft and then knifed David in the leg as she panted heavily while begging him to stop. The 15-minute video was brought to a horrific conclusion as Johnson fatally stabbed her in the neck. By the time that the killing and the woman's body were discovered, the police already had Johnson in custody on charges of theft of a motor vehicle and aggravated flight from an officer. He confessed to the killing and faced any time from 30 years to life imprisonment. Number 1. Bennett Von Vertes. In late December of 2014, British man Alex Morgan, aged 23, flew to Switzerland to spend New Year's on a skiing holiday with his family. Before arriving at his destination, he accepted an invitation to a villa in the exclusive enclave of Kuschnacht, owned by the family of Bennett Von Vertes. Then, in his late 20s, Morgan had met the man who was the son of a millionaire art dealer at Regent's College in London. Vertes' aristocratic parents ran an art gallery in Zurich and hailed from Hungarian-German nobility. They had a respectable reputation, but their son had well-documented problems with substance abuse. In the past, he'd been accused but ultimately cleared of beating and assaulting one of his girlfriends. During his time with Morgan on December the 30th, Vertes took a cocktail of illegal substances and prescription pills that reportedly sent him into a psychotic state with paranoid delusions. He would later tell the authorities that he saw his friend as a green alien who was trying to kill him. Vertes, who practiced kickboxing and at 6'5" towered over Morgan, brutally attacked him. He slammed the man into a glass coffee table which shattered. Morgan was slashed with glass shards and then struck with a golden sculpture and a 3-foot-long candlestick. Vertes killed him by shoving the candlestick down his throat, inflicting such horrific injuries that a closed casket was required for his funeral. A legal battle lasting several years was then sustained by Morgan's barrister mother, Katia Faber, who sought justice for her son against what she perceived as a tendency for legal leniency towards Vertes. Initially convicted of intentional killing and sentenced to 12.5 years, his punishment was reduced to 3 years on appeal, after his legal team argued that he hadn't been responsible for his actions due to the effects of drugs. He was released for time served on the condition that he entered a drug rehabilitation unit. Faber was infuriated upon looking up the clinic and seeing that it looked like a spa, set in an idyllic location and with a number of amenities for its patients. Her ire was further kindled by the Vertes family's offer to pay her emotional compensation for Morgan's death. On her insistence, the prosecution launched a counter-appeal, and in the spring of 2022, Vertes' original sentence was upheld. Number 8. Alec Baldwin. On December the 6th of 2011, actor and comedian Alec Baldwin was removed from an American Airlines flight at Los Angeles International Airport. Baldwin, whose public image had long been characterized by his headstrong and temperamental nature, was reportedly playing the mobile video game Words with Friends shortly prior to the airplane's departure. When the cabin crew requested that he put away his electronic device, he allegedly became violent, abusive, and aggressive. He flew into a fit of rage that unfolded with him shouting at the flight attendant, tossing a collection of loose papers onto the ground, and storming into the bathroom. According to eyewitnesses, Baldwin then pounded on the bathroom walls before returning to the cabin and continuing to yell at the crew members. The celebrity was subsequently escorted off the plane, and his outburst reportedly caused the flight to be delayed about an hour. In the wake of the incident, Baldwin publicly apologized to the passengers who were inconvenienced by his meltdown and its consequences. He also poked fun at his childish behavior during a cameo appearance on Saturday Night Live's Weekend Update segment. Number 7. Misha Barton. British-American actress Misha Barton, who gained mainstream recognition through her role on the popular teen drama series The O.C., was admitted to a hospital after she was filmed ranting incoherently in the backyard of her Los Angeles residence in January of 2017. The footage, captured by her neighbor's security camera, showed Barton angrily shouting about how the world was coming to an end while hanging off the edge of her wooden fence. She was also heard calling her mother a witch before suddenly losing her footing and falling to the ground. In the incident's aftermath, the actress explained how her meltdown had been precipitated by a birthday celebration the previous night. Barton told People magazine that she'd gone out with a group of friends to celebrate her turning 31, but had noticed something erratic about her behavior for several hours after returning home. She subsequently underwent a medical examination, and it was determined that she'd inadvertently consumed the sedative GHB in one of her alcoholic beverages. Although the celebrity maintained that her apparent meltdown had been an isolated incident, her neighbors publicly accused her of frequently having loud crying and screaming fits. She had a history of mental health struggles dating back to the late 2000s. Following a DUI arrest in 2007, Barton had reportedly had a nervous breakdown and was held in psychiatric care. Number 6. Christian Bale. During production for the 2009 science fiction film Terminator Salvation, lead actor Christian Bale was caught on tape having a meltdown after a crew member walked on set while a scene was being filmed. The audio recording of the incident, captured without the actor's knowledge, was leaked to the public in February of 2009. A few months prior to the film's release, Bale had become enraged at cinematographer Shane Hurlbut after he'd inspected one of the lights on set in the middle of him filming a scene. Bale, claiming that it was the second time Hurlbut had interrupted production in such a manner, then launched a rage-fueled barrage of expletives at him. He threatened to destroy Hurlbut's lighting equipment and also vowed to quit the film if he committed the offense again without being fired. The cinematographer remained contrite and apologetic throughout the recording, which subsequently triggered considerable public backlash against Bale for his hostile and abusive behavior. The actor has since apologized for his actions and also indicated that he and Hurlbut had settled their differences shortly after the incident. Number 5. Tom Cruise. On May the 23rd of 2005, prominent actor Tom Cruise appeared on Oprah Winfrey's daytime talk show to promote the Steven Spielberg-directed sci-fi action film War of the Worlds. The interview, clips of which were widely circulated in the aftermath, primarily centered on Cruise's personal life rather than the upcoming film release. The actor and Winfrey spent most of the show discussing his relationship with actress Katie Holmes, which had begun just 1 month earlier. Shortly after the commencement of the interview, the actor began jumping up and down on Winfrey's yellow couch, pumping his fists and loudly declaring that he was in love with his girlfriend. Winfrey was described in subsequent reports as having been taken aback by Cruz's bizarre behavior. During the actor's outburst, which was widely parodied in various entertainment mediums in the aftermath, she commented, "He's gone, the boy is gone," as the studio audience broke into enthusiastic cheers. Cruz and Holmes went on to have a child together, and in November of 2006, they were married at the 15th century Odescalchi Castle in the small Italian town of Bracciano. In June of 2012, Holmes filed for divorce from Cruz. She later argued that her decision had been, at least in part, made in order to protect the couple's daughter from Cruz's controversial belief in Scientology. Number 4. David Hasselhoff. Actor David Hasselhoff became a cultural icon throughout the 1980s and into the 90s. after appearing in such popular television series as The Young and the Restless, Knight Rider, and Baywatch. In 2007, Hasselhoff made headlines for a viral YouTube video in which he was shown eating a cheeseburger while severely drunk at his residence. The clip was reportedly filmed by the actor's daughter, Taylor Ann, who could be heard asking that he stop abusing alcohol. She also warned Hasselhoff that his addiction could potentially jeopardize his career as an actor. Following the video's emergence, Hasselhoff issued a statement in which he clarified that he'd asked his daughter to record it in order for him to see how he behaved while intoxicated. In the incident's wake, Hasselhoff had his visitation rights with his two daughters temporarily suspended. In 2009, the actor's attorney indicated that he'd since sought professional help for his addiction, calling him a recovering alcoholic. Number 3. Winona Ryder. Actress Winona Ryder was arrested at a Saks Fifth Avenue department store in Beverly Hills, California, on December the 12th of 2001. The Minnesota native, who by then had become a global celebrity, had allegedly stolen $5,500 worth of unpaid designer clothes and accessories. Upon being detained by the store security personnel, Ryder was brought into the back offices where she signed 2 civil demand letters. She was then taken into the custody of Beverly Hills police on suspicion of shoplifting. As per the stipulations of California's statute for civil recovery for shoplifting, the actress was ordered to pay restitution for the stolen merchandise. Prosecutors ultimately filed 4 felony charges against Ryder, and her legal defense team failed to negotiate a plea bargain, prompting the case to go to trial. During the ensuing legal proceedings, Ryder was accused of using drugs including oxycodone, diazepam, and Vicodin without valid prescriptions. She was ultimately convicted of grand theft, shoplifting, and vandalism, which resulted in her being sentenced to 3 years of probation and 480 hours of community service. Additionally, Ryder was ordered to pay more than $10,000 in fines and restitution payments, as well as to attend psychological and drug counseling. In subsequent interviews, Ryder explained how her apparent meltdown and criminal behavior had occurred during a time when she was suffering from clinical depression. She also alleged that her judgment had been severely clouded by the pain-killing medication that had been prescribed to her by a physician. Number 2. Charlie Sheen. Actor Charlie Sheen rose to prominence in the 1980s and 90s after appearing in high-profile films such as Platoon, Wall Street, and The Three Musketeers. His celebrity status within the entertainment industry grew exponentially when he was cast in one of the lead roles of the CBS sitcom 2.5 Men, which had an extremely successful run that spanned 12 seasons. Although Sheen's accomplishments as an actor had made him an internationally recognized celebrity, his personal life also became the subject of public scrutiny and curiosity throughout his career. He struggled with substance abuse for years, and in 1998 he was hospitalized after reportedly overdosing on cocaine. In January of 2011, 2.5 Men went on a production hiatus, while Sheen underwent his 3rd attempt at drug rehabilitation over the course of 12 months. Shortly thereafter, the actor publicly made derogatory comments towards the series' creator, causing him to be banned from the Warner Brothers' production lot. The following month, Sheen's 2.5 Men contract with CBS was terminated, and his character was replaced with Ashton Kutcher on the show. In the wake of his dismissal, Sheen had a highly publicized meltdown, during which he appeared in several interviews and internet videos that went viral. In one such clip, he famously suggested that he was a warlock with tiger blood and Adonis DNA. Sheen also posted videos to YouTube in which he was shown smoking cigarettes through his nose and directing profanity-laced insults at his former employers. Sheen's erratic behavior ultimately led to the swift deterioration of his acting career, which failed to fully recover following the negative publicity he received. Number 1. Britney Spears. In 2007, pop icon Britney Spears' personal life came under intense public scrutiny following a series of bizarre and embarrassing incidents. Her long-lasting public meltdown began on February the 16th, a day after she'd checked out of a rehabilitation facility in the Caribbean. Spears entered a salon in the Los Angeles suburb of Tarzana and proceeded to shave her head completely bald. Pictures of the singer's shaved head were quickly spread online and in various tabloids, causing many of her fans to question her behavior. A few days later, Spears checked into an alcohol and drug rehab treatment facility in Malibu. Although she subsequently checked out less than 24 hours later, her husband brought her back the following day and requested an emergency hearing regarding custody of their 2 children. In the summer of 2007, Spears issued a statement via her website in which she described how she'd hit rock bottom during her time in rehab. A couple months later, she and her husband finalized their divorce. Then in August of 2007, Spears fled the scene of a traffic accident and was later charged with 2 counts of hit and run. She was ordered to relinquish custody of her children to her ex-husband, and in January of 2008, she was taken to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles after police had found her under the influence of an unidentified substance inside her home. In the wake of her hospitalization, Spears was placed under a conservatorship led by her father that was given complete control of her financial assets. The decision would eventually spark the Free Britney movement started in 2019 and then growing into a worldwide phenomenon in the early 2020s. The singer's fans pointed to the purported negative effects of the conservatorship on her mental and emotional health as she'd begun exhibiting erratic behavior on social media. Conspiracy theories arose that Spears was secretly trying to transmit messages online, seeking help and release from the arrangement. The singer herself eventually expressed dissatisfaction with it, accusing her family and management of abuse, coercion, mistreatment, and conflict on interests. She appeared in court and asked that the conservatorship be terminated, which came to fruition in March of 2022. One day after being freed from it, Spears abruptly deleted her Instagram. She then reactivated her account 2 days later, but neglected to provide fans with a reason for her sudden and short-lived disappearance from social media. Number 7. Jeremy Christian. In May of 2017, Oregon man Jeremy Christian began hatefully ranting and raving at a pair of teenage girls, one of whom was black and the other wearing a hijab, on a rush-hour Max Light rail train in Portland. The man, a self-proclaimed white nationalist, allegedly directed anti-Muslim slurs at one of the teens and shouted about how minorities were ruining the city. As the rant continued, the train operator came over the loudspeaker, imploring the individual creating the disturbance to exit the train immediately. Christian refused, however, continuing to berate the teens with pleas for them to get out of his country. Shortly thereafter, a pair of bystanders emerged from the crowded group of onlookers to intervene on the girls' behalf. Taliesin Mirdin, Namkai Michi, and Micah David Cole Fletcher approached Christian and demanded he get off the train. While attempting to form a barrier between the man and the targets of his abuse, Fletcher gave Christian a slight shove, followed by another push, causing him to fall backwards. Christian menacingly warned, "Touch me again and I'm going to kill you." According to subsequent police reports, the man then pulled out a knife and began slashing Namkai Michi, Fletcher, and Ricky Best, who was standing nearby. The crowd of horrified passengers fled from the train car at the next stop, as did Christian, who'd left all 3 stabbing victims in critical condition. When emergency crews arrived at the scene, Best was pronounced dead, while the other 2 wounded men were taken to a local hospital. Namkai Michi, who'd been recording the incident with his cell phone, later succumbed to his injuries, while Fletcher ultimately survived. Christian was tracked down by a group of roughly 8 officers who took him into custody on the north side of Providence Portland Medical Center. During his arrest, he allegedly proclaimed, "I can die in prison a happy man." He faced charges of murder and attempted murder, as well as other crimes, including a separate hate crime assault the previous day. A jury found Christian guilty on all counts, and in the summer of 2020, he was sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms. Number 6. Sofia Rosen. University of Kentucky student Sofia Rosen was arrested following a drunken, racially charged, verbal tirade directed towards a fellow student in the early hours of November the 6th of 2022. The 22-year-old business and marketing major was visibly intoxicated when she stumbled into one of the dorms on the university's Lexington campus. Student Kyla Spring, who was working at the front desk that night, attempted to restrain Rosen from getting on the elevator because she didn't have an ID card with her. The inebriated young woman then called Spring a racial slur and kicked her in the stomach. As was captured on cell phone video, Rosen subsequently tried to run the student employee over with a shopping cart, she found in the lobby before biting another student present at the scene. A campus police officer arrived a short time later and placed Rosen in handcuffs as she continued to hurl racial insults at Spring and her friend. Facing charges of intoxication in a public place, third-degree assault on a police officer, fourth-degree assault and second-degree disorderly conduct, she was booked at the Fayette County Detention Center on a $10,000 bond. In the aftermath of her outburst, which went viral on social media, Rosen was fired from her job at Dillard's department store, and many called for her to be expelled from the university. Number 5. Esmeralda Upton. A Texas woman was arrested for verbally and physically assaulting a group of Indian women in a parking lot in Plano on August 24th of 2022. According to local police, Badisha Rudra and her friends had just exited the 60 Vines restaurant and began exchanging goodbyes in their native tongue when they were approached by Esmeralda Upton. In a video that subsequently went viral on social media, Upton was shown berating the women while using racial slurs and shouting for them to go back to India. The unhinged woman also allegedly threatened to shoot them multiple times, indicating that she had a firearm in her vehicle. At one point, she punched Rudra's wrist forcefully while attempting to make contact with her face. Upton wasn't immediately taken into police custody because the criminal offenses didn't occur in the presence of the responding patrol officers. She was, however, arrested the following day and reportedly faced charges of assault and making threats. After posting her $10,000 bond, Upton was released, pending the continuation of the case's legal proceedings. In the meantime, the woman was sued by Rudra, who claimed that the incident had traumatized her and caused her emotional distress. Number 4. Michael Withers. Back in 1987, a man broke into Lillian Kuhler's home in St. Paul, Minnesota, leading to a deadly physical altercation. After fruitlessly attempting to fight off her intruder, Kuhler, who was 81 at the time, was fatally strangled. The case subsequently went cold for more than 3 decades before developments in DNA testing technology allowed investigators to finally identify the elderly woman's killer as Michael Withers, described as a serial burglar who lived only a mile from his victim's house. The man eventually reached a plea bargain with prosecutors. However, during his sentencing hearing in Ramsey County Court in October of 2018, Withers went on a scathing rant in which he accused both the judge and county attorney of punishing him solely for political gain. Then 60-year-old Withers refused to take responsibility for his actions or apologize to Kuhler's family, instead saying that the case's legal proceedings had devolved into a media circus. With hostility in his voice, the defendant then addressed the judge directly, stating, "You and the DA have made it about you and what you hope to gain in the future by your lack of empathy or integrity." The victim's family called Withers' remarks callous and upsetting. He was ultimately sentenced to 20 years behind bars, the maximum punishment allowed for the crime under 1987 law. Number 3. Susan Westwood. On October the 19th of 2018, the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department in North Carolina received multiple 911 calls from someone claiming that 2 people were attempting to break into residences in the 8800 block of Fairview Road. Responding officers were unable to locate the caller, identified as 51-year-old Susan Westwood. They did, however, encounter the 2 women Westwood had falsely accused of wrongdoing, sisters Lisa and Mary Garris. The latter 2 had begun recording Westwood as she drunkenly ranted at them about how they shouldn't be loitering in the parking lot. Mary explained that they were trying to get in touch with AAA because their car wouldn't start, but the intoxicated woman continued berating them, at certain points hurling racially degrading remarks at them. When the Garrises uploaded a video clip online, it garnered widespread attention, with Westwood derisively being dubbed South Park Susan. She was also terminated from her job at Spectrum Enterprise, which stated that the incident was a blatant violation of the company's code of conduct and clearly disregards the company's commitment to inclusion and respectful behavior. Local police subsequently issued a warrant for Westwood's arrest on a charge of misuse of the 911 system. She turned herself in shortly thereafter. In the summer of 2019, Westwood entered a guilty plea to 911 misuse, as well as 2 counts of simple battery. She was consequently sentenced to 12 months of unsupervised probation and was also ordered to participate in community support meetings as well as an aftercare alcohol program. Number 2. Shia LaBeouf. Polarizing Hollywood actor Shia LaBeouf, who rose to prominence with his starring role on the 2000s Disney Channel series Even Stevens, before cultivating a thriving career in films, was arrested for causing a disturbance in downtown Savannah, Georgia. The incident occurred in the early morning hours of July the 8th of 2017. Officers were called to the scene where then 31-year-old LaBeouf was allegedly drunk in public. As was captured on the police's body cams, the actor became belligerent towards law enforcement, at one point telling one of the officers, "You're going straight to hell." When asked why he made such a severe proclamation, LaBeouf replied, "Because he's a black man." The celebrity continued ranting at police as he was taken into custody on charges of public intoxication, disorderly conduct, and obstruction. In the wake of the incident, LaBeouf issued a public apology to the Savannah officers he verbally abused, indicating he was deeply ashamed of his behavior and made no excuses for it. He also attributed his outburst to his struggles with alcohol addiction. In October of 2017, he pleaded no contest to disorderly conduct and was additionally found guilty of obstruction, leading to a sentence of 1 year probation. LaBeouf was also ordered to pay a $1,000 fine and attend therapy for his anger and substance abuse problems. Number 1. Terry Samsonayuk. The city of Edmonton in Alberta, Canada, enacted a temporary bylaw on August 1st of 2022 that required citizens to wear face coverings while in public spaces and public transit. The following day, 61-year-old Terry Samsonayuk walked into Olympia Liquors on 137 Avenue without a mask. The store's supervisor, Nadeep Singh, later described how the man began acting confrontationally as soon as he walked in, yelling at Singh and other customers to take off their masks. The manager asked the belligerent man to leave, citing the new city policy as well as the store's own mask requirement, but he refused, instead shifting the subject of his rant towards Singh's appearance and beliefs. In a viral video resulting from the incident, Samsonayuk bemoaned about how Singh's people had come to Canada, calling him brainwashed and his long beard stupid. Following his racist tirade and failure to comply with city ordinances, Samsonayuk faced criminal charges of assault and causing a disturbance. Number 6. Austin Harrouff. On the night of August the 15th of 2016, Florida couple John Stevens III and Michelle Mishkon were sitting in the garage of their Tequesta home with the door open when they were suddenly attacked by a passerby. 19-year-old Florida State University student Austin Harrouff stabbed the victims repeatedly with tools he found in the garage, as well as a pocket knife. A neighbor subsequently came over to help the couple but was also injured by the young man. When authorities arrived at the scene, they found Harrouff on top of Stevens, attempting to bite chunks out of his face and abdomen. An officer deployed his taser on the suspect, which did little to subdue him. It ultimately took 2 deputies using every bit of strength they had to wrestle Harrouff into custody. Law enforcement's immediate theory was that the unhinged college student had taken some sort of street drug, such as flakka, but that was refuted when his toxicology report came back clean. Investigators learned that on the night of the incident, Harrouff had been eating dinner at a restaurant with his father when he suddenly got up and left. He wandered into the street and proceeded to walk more than 3 miles before eventually happening upon the victims in their garage and launching his unprovoked attack. The young man's parents told the police he'd been acting strangely in the weeks leading up to his outburst, and also informed them that mental illness, including schizophrenia, ran in the family. During the case's court proceedings in November of 2022, a judge accepted Harrouff's plea of not guilty by reason of insanity to 2 counts of first-degree murder. He was subsequently moved to a mental health facility until medical professionals determined he is not a risk to society. Number 5. Jonathan Wesley Harris. In the early hours of August 22nd of 2018, former Playboy model Christina Carle Craft met a man named Jonathan Wesley Harris, who'd agreed to sell her an ounce of cocaine for $1,200 in downtown Philadelphia. When the pair got to the 36-year-old woman's Ardmore apartment, they reportedly drank several bottles of wine and had consensual intercourse. Then, Harris flew into a rage when Carle Craft refused to pay for the illegal substances he'd given her, leading to a violent altercation. The woman allegedly struck Harris over the head with a glass bottle, to which he retaliated by repeatedly slapping and punching her. When the model tried to run away, he tied her up on the bed. She subsequently asked if she could call her dad, but instead used the phone to dial 911, further angering Harris. While describing the incident to law enforcement, the man admitted to choking Carle Craft until she stopped screaming, saying, "I panicked. I was scared. I didn't know what to do." Although he claimed to have believed the woman to still be alive, Harris fled out the apartment's back door and jumped from the balcony as she lay unresponsive in her bed. When emergency crews were sent to the scene, Carle Craft was pronounced dead, having sustained several broken bones in her face as well as significant bruising. A medical examiner determined her official cause of death to have been strangulation and detected no illegal substances in her system. Harris was arrested and charged with a number of offenses, including murder, robbery, and theft. In court, the man's defense team conceded that the inculpatory evidence pointing to his involvement in the killing was undeniable. They did, however, attempt to convey Harris's impaired mental state, claiming he'd been out of his mind on ketamine at the time of the deadly altercation, which had caused him to snap. In the end, Harris was found guilty on all charges. For what prosecutors called a fit of demonic torture, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Number 4. Jason Jablonski. The police in Virginia Beach were called to the 1200 block of Edenham Court near the Chesapeake City line for a report of a violent altercation on the morning of March the 11th of 2022. Law enforcement found the body of 45-year-old Herbert Bryant inside. A preliminary investigation led detectives to ID a Navy sailor named Jason Jablonski as their first suspect. According to Navy records, 41-year-old Jablonski was a gunner's mate first class, stationed at Naval Station Norfolk at the time of the incident. Investigators determined that the sailor had gotten into a heated argument with Bryant that eventually morphed into a physical fight, although the nature of their disagreement wasn't immediately made clear. Jablonski was said to have been on a crack bender at the time, which contributed to his erratic and violent behavior. At some point during the fight, the suspect allegedly struck Bryant in the face with a dumbbell, which he then pressed down on the victim's neck until he stopped moving. Jablonski was arrested on a charge of second-degree murder, while the police also identified an accomplice named Heather Totty, aged 35. The latter was charged with accessory to murder after the fact, having witnessed the deadly altercation, after which she allegedly helped move the victim's body and clean up the crime scene. Both suspects were denied bond after being taken into custody. In October of 2022, Jablonski's legal team proposed a guilty plea of voluntary manslaughter, but the judge ruled that the plea wouldn't be accepted or denied until January of 2023. Number 3. Coweta County car crash. In the early morning hours of June the 30th of 2022, an errant vehicle traveling at speeds far exceeding the posted limit careened off the road and crashed into a house, killing a woman inside. The incident occurred on Johnson Road in Senoia, Georgia, where Annette Rush lived and was an active member of the community, especially at her local church. On the morning in question, a Coweta County Sheriff's deputy attempted to pull over a car that failed to dim its lights. The traffic stop was initiated at about 2:30 a.m. on Gordon Road in Senoia. Rather than cooperate with law enforcement, however, the motorist sped off, reportedly reaching 130 miles per hour during the ensuing pursuit. The deputy eventually lost track of the car before encountering a commotion on the 900 block of Johnson Road. The driver, who'd fled the traffic stop, had veered off course after reaching a curve in the road. The vehicle's wayward trajectory ultimately landed it in the path leading directly to Annette Rush's home. The car smashed through the front porch and knocked out the main electrical breaker before barreling into one of the duplex's bedrooms where Rush was sleeping. Although the woman was left critically injured after being trapped beneath rubble, her family initially believed she was going to be okay, as she reportedly gave them a thumbs up while being placed in an ambulance. From there, she was taken to the hospital for treatment, but her condition only worsened. Eventually, doctors had no choice but to cease their efforts and pronounce her dead. The victim's husband had been on the couch at the time of the accident, and was left unharmed. The couple's 28-year-old son, Leonard, was hospitalized with a shoulder injury but ultimately made it out with his life. The driver responsible for Rush's death was described as a boy not yet of legal driving age. He was taken into custody and held at a youth detention center pending his case's legal proceedings. Number 2. Henry Hammond. In May of 2019, Australian woman Courtney Heron was brutally beaten to death with a tree branch by a homeless man in the throes of a schizophrenic relapse. The 25-year-old's body was found hidden beneath branches in Melbourne's Royal Park. A witness who was sleeping in the park at the time of the fatal altercation reported hearing Heron say, "Are you going to kill me?" as she and Henry Hammond were walking nearby. The man subsequently picked up a tree branch and started bashing her over the head with it. He was so intense he was grunting. It went on for 50 minutes, said the eyewitness, who testified in court during the case's ensuing trial. After the victim was dead, Hammond bound her legs together and attempted to hide the body before making off with her phone and wallet. Hours earlier, after they just met, Heron had reportedly treated Hammond to a meal before the pair partook of crystal meth together and went for a walk in the park. When law enforcement caught up with the suspect the following day, he claimed to have attacked Heron because he recognized her from a past life and that she'd buried his wife alive. His delusional thinking reportedly stemmed from his relapsing schizophrenia, which he'd been suffering from since 2017. In March of 2021, Victoria's Supreme Court spared Hammond any prison time for Heron's slaying. He was instead committed to a high-security mental health clinic in Fairfield for 25 years, having been found not guilty of murder due to mental impairment. Number 1. Hemi Neumann. Georgia man Rusty Snyderman was gunned down after dropping his son off at a Dunwoody daycare on November the 18th of 2010. A few months later, investigators identified a man by the name of Hemi Neumann, who supervised Snyderman's wife at GE Energy as a suspect. In January of 2011, Neumann was taken into custody on suspicion of committing the murder, allegedly because he and the victim's wife, Andrea, were having an affair. During the ensuing legal proceedings, Neumann maintained that he was mentally unstable and that it was his decline in mental health that led to him carrying out the deadly shooting. In March of 2012, the jury accepted this argument, ruling that he was guilty but mentally ill. He was subsequently given a life sentence. 5 months later, Andrea Snyderman was issued a criminal indictment alleging her involvement in her husband's killing. Among the charges levied against the woman were malice murder, attempted murder, racketeering, and insurance fraud. The murder charge was eventually dismissed, but in August of 2013, Andrea was convicted of 9 felony counts and was consequently sentenced to 5 years in prison. 2 years later, Neumann's murder conviction was reversed by Georgia Supreme Court, which cited a violation of attorney-client privilege in support of its decision. The man was awarded a new trial, which in August of 2016 concluded with him being found guilty and once again receiving a life prison sentence. Although Neumann subsequently sought a third trial, the Supreme Court unanimously upheld his second conviction in March of 2021.
Number 8. Malvi Malhotra. Indian model turned actress Malvi Malhotra began being stalked by a television producer with whom she'd first interacted on social media in the late summer of 2020. Although the 29-year-old's initial exchanges with Yogesh Mahapil Singh were reportedly related to her work as a television performer, Malhotra later recounted how the producer abruptly proposed to her. The sudden gesture led her to doubt his intentions in pursuing her. She rejected his marriage proposal, but Singh continued to stalk Malhotra, even following her on a 2-week trip to Dubai in October of 2020. The unnerving situation culminated in violence on October the 26th, when Singh approached Malhotra with a knife on a busy street in Mumbai and stabbed her 3 times in the stomach. The actress was taken to the Kokilaban hospital, where she underwent surgery to mend the extensive damage to her abdomen. Mumbai police eventually located Singh at a hospital in Vasai, where he'd been taken following an unrelated accident. He was then brought to the Voiceover police station and charged with attempted murder. According to updates on the matter, Singh's bail plea was rejected by the Sessions Court. Number 7. Jason Eaton and Wendy Sabatini. On October the 25th of 2016, Indiana man Jason Eaton walked into the Greensburg Police Department accompanied by a woman and requested to speak with an officer. While at the station, the 43-year-old would confess to murdering his girlfriend, Wendy Sabatini, in their home. officers were dispatched to the couple's residence where they were allowed in by Sabatini's son, who'd reportedly just arrived home from a school-related internship. The police found Sabatini's dead body in an upstairs bedroom. She'd suffered an apparent gunshot wound to the head, and investigators were able to recover a firearm from the bedroom. Eaton remained in custody at the police station while his home was searched and provided further information on the killing. During an interview with detectives, the man stated that he'd approached Sabatini with an engagement ring and was about to ask for her hand in marriage, but the woman declined before he was able to officially propose. Enraged, Eaton then retrieved a handgun from his dresser and fired a single round into the back of Sabatini's head. He told police that he subsequently went to the house of the woman who'd accompanied him to the station and told her that he'd messed up. Eaton was ultimately convicted of Sabatini's murder and sentenced to 45 years in prison, followed by 2 years of probation. Number 6. Julio Ortiz and Diana Luna. After putting an end to her abusive relationship in April of 2021, Colombian woman Diana Luna was stalked by her ex-boyfriend for several months. In June of that same year, the 23-year-old was reportedly ambushed by the man, identified as Julio Alexander Ortiz, near the town of Usme. 33-year-old Ortiz ordered the young woman to climb on his motorcycle. He then drove to a nearby motel where he forced himself upon Luna and assaulted her. Shortly thereafter, Ortiz took the victim to a farm area in the town of El Uval. It was there that he allegedly presented Luna with an engagement ring and asked her to marry him. She rejected his proposal, to which Ortiz responded by savagely attacking her with a piece of barbed wire and a saw. During his onslaught, Ortiz mutilated Luna's face, struck her abdomen, back, and hips, and stabbed her just above her right ear. As she was being relentlessly attacked, the young woman somehow managed to place a phone call to her family, who notified local police of the urgent situation. Ortiz would have likely killed her, but the authorities were able to reach Luna's location in time and transport her to a nearby hospital, where she reportedly received 49 stitches to close off the lacerations to her face. Over the course of the next few months, Luna underwent 6 facial reconstructive surgeries to ease her excruciating pain and undo some of the damage Ortiz had inflicted. The latter was arrested and released that same day, which reportedly led to a public outcry that ultimately resulted in him being placed under house arrest. Number 5. Christopher Tucker and Tara Serino. On November the 1st of 2017, the father of Pennsylvania woman Tara Serino reported her missing after not having heard from her for 2 days. Court documents indicated that in the last exchange the man had had with his 19-year-old daughter, she told him that she was going out with a friend of hers named Christopher Tucker. It soon emerged that the latter had recently been admitted to a hospital in Illinois for evaluation after being arrested for attempting to break into a combine harvester while the owner of the machine was still inside of it. The police department in Serino's hometown got in contact with detectives in Illinois and requested that they question Tucker regarding the missing woman's whereabouts. During an ensuing interview, 34-year-old Tucker reportedly told the police that he'd asked Serino to marry him a few days prior, but the young woman had declined his proposal. Tucker then confessed to murdering her. According to police records, Tucker strangled Serino, broke her neck, and then bludgeoned her with a hatchet before wrapping her mangled body in a rug and leaving it at his Albany Township residence. In response to Tucker's hospital confession, investigators went to his home where they found Serino's body wrapped in a blanket in the bedroom. Her devastating injuries were deemed to be consistent with Tucker's story, and the man was thereupon taken into custody and charged with the murder. Although Tucker attempted to shirk responsibility for his actions by claiming he was mentally ill, he was ultimately convicted of first-degree murder in May of 2021. Number 4. Alex Haynes. An Ohio woman contacted her family on the morning of December the 26th of 2017 to tell them that she was being held captive by her boyfriend, Alex Haynes, at their Columbus residence. The victim's relatives contacted the police and officers were subsequently dispatched to the home. Upon their arrival, they spotted the woman through a second-level window as she was holding her 2-year-old daughter. The victim told them that she was unable to leave because Haynes had previously threatened to shoot her if she tried to escape. The officers ultimately defused the situation by convincing 28-year-old Haynes to exit the home and he was taken into custody without incident. While the victim was being interviewed, she reportedly revealed that Haynes had become upset with her after she'd rejected his marriage proposal on Christmas Eve. Investigators performed a search of the home, which led to them finding multiple weapons and $20,000 in cash. They also discovered approximately 11 pounds of fentanyl, which the authorities claimed was enough to kill thousands of people throughout central Ohio. Haynes was consequently charged with drug possession, as well as aggravated menacing, and his bail was set at $1.25 million. Number 3. Latif Ahmed and Sonia Bibi. In October of 2015, Pakistani woman Sonia Bibi was admitted to Nishtar Hospital with severe burns to roughly 50% of her body. The 20-year-old told local police that her boyfriend, Latif Ahmed, had doused her with gasoline and then set her on fire. The ruthless attack was preceded by an argument that stemmed from Bibi rejecting the man's marriage proposal. Ahmed, a 24-year-old resident of a remote Multan district village, was arrested shortly after the victim had given her testimony. Police officials reported that the young woman had claimed she'd fallen out of love with Ahmed prior to declining his proposal. Medical staff at Nishtar Hospital initially expected Bibi to survive, but less than a month after the incident, she reportedly passed away after suffering an infection. Number 2. Mayra Zulfikar. British law school graduate Mayra Zulfikar was gunned down in the Pakistani city of Lahore in May of 2021. Sky News reported that the 24-year-old had traveled to her native country to attend her cousin's wedding a couple of months prior to the incident. She subsequently decided to remain in order to avoid paying the $2,400 fee to be quarantined in the UK after Pakistan had been placed on the COVID-19 red list. The victim's uncle, named as Mohammed Nazir, would later inform investigators that the young woman had told him she was embroiled in a dispute with 2 male suitors who allegedly threatened her with dire consequences after she turned down their marriage proposals. On May the 3rd, Nazir went to his niece's Lahore apartment, where he reportedly found Zulfikar's bullet-riddled body lying in a pool of blood. A post-mortem examination indicated that the young woman had passed away from gunshot wounds to the neck and arm. In June of 2021, it was reported that Lahore police had arrested a man named Zahir Jadoon in connection to the fatal shooting. Jadoon was identified as one of Zulfikar's suitors by Nazir. As of the latest updates on the situation, investigators were still working to conclusively identify the perpetrators of Zulfikar's murder. Number 1. Panaya Vang. After a night of partying in the early morning hours of June the 17th of 2018, a man drove Panaya Vang and another woman in his Hummer HU2 to a house in White Bear Township, Minnesota. A sober acquaintance of Vang's drove her car to the address, as she was too intoxicated to drive herself. As indicated by a criminal complaint, once they'd arrived at their destination, 29-year-old Vang refused to get out of the man's Hummer and abruptly asked him to marry her. The man declined and proceeded to exit the vehicle, at which point Vang reportedly climbed into the driver's seat and drove off. The SUV's owner jumped into Vang's car and followed closely behind until the woman eventually pulled over to the side of the road. The owner approached the driver's side door of the Hummer and began pounding on the window, asking Vang to get out of his vehicle. He then grabbed hold of the roof rack and moments later, Vang abruptly accelerated and kept her foot pressed on the pedal. Subsequent reports indicated that Vang reached speeds of up to 80 miles per hour, while the man was desperately clinging to the side of the vehicle. Vang then decelerated sharply, causing the Hummer's owner to lose his grip of the roof rack and hurtle through the air before landing on the side of the road near a guardrail. He reportedly lost consciousness for about a minute and was subsequently taken to a hospital where he was treated for multiple broken bones. Vang was arrested upon visiting the hospital the following day. She claimed not having any recollection of the incident as a result of the multiple alcoholic drinks she'd had on the night. Vang was consequently charged with theft of a motor vehicle and criminal vehicular operation resulting in substantial bodily harm.
Number 6. Markeith Lloyd. A Florida judge sentenced 46-year-old Markeith Lloyd to death in early March of 2022, roughly 5 years after he'd gunned down his ex-girlfriend and an Orlando police officer. In January of 2017, Lloyd was on the run as a wanted man for the death of his pregnant ex, Sade Dixon, who'd been fatally shot in December of the previous year. On January the 9th, a Walmart shopper spotted him and alerted 42-year-old Lieutenant Deborah Clayton, who was also at the store. She tried to confront Lloyd outside, but he opened fire on her. Clayton was shot 4 times with the final fatal round released as Lloyd was standing over her in the parking lot. After a 9-day manhunt, officers found him hiding under a home. He allegedly resisted arrest and was taken into custody with force, resulting in him losing an eye and suffering brain damage. During his initial court appearance, he stated that he planned to represent himself and directed a profanity-laced outburst at the judge and present law enforcement, claiming that he'd been a victim of police brutality. Lloyd maintained that he never tried to resist as he crawled into the road from under the home and, in reference to the officers, said, "They done took my eye, broke my nose, broke my jaw." He cursed at the judge directly upon being removed from the courtroom. The man's mental health came into question throughout the trial, and a clinical psychologist noted that Lloyd suffered from the delusional belief that he was a slave whom his masters, the judge and prosecutors, were intent on destroying. In 2019, Lloyd was sentenced to life in prison after being convicted on multiple charges in connection to Dixon's death. 3 years later, he was given the death penalty for the Clayton slaying. As the latter sentence was handed down, much like his initial court appearance, Lloyd once again verbally lashed out in the courtroom. Number 5. Olivia Lara. A courtroom in Fall River, Massachusetts, was cleared in January of 2014 following the emotional outburst of a woman facing human trafficking charges. 38-year-old Olivia Lara was accused of procuring teenage escorts for the patrons of a Fall River bar and then driving them to meet their clients. Lara started crying when a judge set her cash bond at $100,000. She professed her innocence and repeatedly sobbed, "I didn't do it," as she was being led out of the courtroom. In a video-recorded incident, Lara then began screaming and thrashing uncontrollably. As she reached the door, she threw herself to the floor and 2 officers struggled to bring her under control while simultaneously clearing the room. In 2018, she pleaded guilty to the lesser crime of deriving support from escort services. She was sentenced to 3 years. She'd already served in jail while her case was pending and was released on bail. Number 4. Kendrick Keanti Gregory. Following his extradition from New York City, Kendrick Keanti Gregory appeared in a courtroom in North Carolina in connection to a crime spree he'd been accused of carrying out in Raleigh in August of 2015. At the time, 21-year-old Gregory was on probation for an unrelated case for breaking into 2 vehicles. His rampage began with the fatal shooting of 64-year-old Thomas Melvin Durand, owner of the Mr. Pawn check-cashing shop on Capitol Boulevard. After the shooting, he assaulted and abused a female teenager before robbing and non-fatally shooting another man. 2 days later, the police used a mobile app to track an SUV that had been reported stolen in Manhattan and arrested Gregory in Brooklyn without incident. They retrieved 1 handgun from his pocket and found another under the driver's seat. In October of 2015, he was indicted by a Wake County jury on 10 charges, including murder, assault, robbery, and kidnapping. As he entered the room during a subsequent court appearance, Gregory yelled out, "Tell the Illuminati I am the Antichrist. I'm here to take over the world," while having a crazed look in his eyes. At the end of what was a brief hearing, he stated the Empire State Building was going up in flames. His mother told a media outlet that he suffered from mental health issues and that he had previously been in and out of medical facilities. Gregory was eventually sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Number 3. Kweohuru Govan. In February of 2004, Sharabia Thomas left her home in Brooklyn, New York City and headed for school, never to be seen alive again. She was found inside 2 laundry bags on the side of an alleyway adjacent to 130 Palmetto Street in Bushwick. Thomas, at the time in her late teens, had been restrained at the wrists and ankles, had suffered blunt force trauma to her head and torso before having her neck fatally compressed. The following year, the dismembered remains of Bushwick resident Rashawn Brazel, who was also in his late teens, were discovered in a subway tunnel and at a Brooklyn recycling plant. His head was never found. Thomas's murder went cold until 2016, when DNA material from her nail clippings linked 38-year-old Kwehuru Govan to the crime. The man, whom at the time was imprisoned in Florida on an armed robbery charge, was charged with murder. A personal notebook with the sketch of a chair-like device meant to restrain women during intimate encounters was found among his personal items, and the restraints in the design matched the ligature markings found on Thomas's arms. The following year, DNA also linked Govan to the murder of Brazel, who was his neighbor and who lived within blocks of Thomas. Law enforcement feared they were dealing with a serial killer who could have claimed more victims in Florida, California, and New York. After being charged with the second cold case killing, Govan had an outburst when he was arraigned in court on February the 22nd of 2017. He refused to be fingerprinted by administrative workers and had to be hauled into the courtroom by a dozen police officers who hoisted him off the floor while he was in handcuffs and shackles. Govan kept screaming at reporters that he was being framed, also professing his innocence to the judge and claiming that he couldn't even dissect a frog. In another bizarre episode, during a court appearance on March the 3rd, he reportedly mouthed, "You know I love you," to Brazel's mother. As of subsequent updates, he was convicted of killing Thomas and sentenced to 25 years to life in prison in September of 2018, with the Brazel case still pending. Number 2. Kamil Kowalski. Polish national Kamil Kowalski was enraged at the prospect of being hauled off to Teesside Magistrates Court in Middlesbrough, England, for breaching a restraining order that barred him from contacting his ex. He threatened that he would set himself ablaze in court, which led to staff removing flammable substances from the room. During his hearing in July of 2020, 38-year-old Kowalski snuck hand sanitizer and a cigarette lighter inside the courtroom. Midway through his case, as he sat before District Judge Timothy Capstick, Kowalski poured the liquid on his left arm and then set it ablaze. In the moments that followed, he ran towards the bench, knocking over a clerk. Fortunately, officers were on alert due to his previous threats and promptly took control of Kowalski. They also put out the fire before any major damage was done. The incident was deemed an extraordinary outburst by Kowalski's own defense lawyer. The culprit himself later mentioned that he'd been trying to bring attention to what he'd felt was unfair treatment by the courts system. Kowalski maintained that he'd been trying to get people to listen to him and that he'd only tried to harm himself. He subsequently pleaded guilty to multiple charges that included assault, affray, and using threatening behavior. Number 1. Luis Enrique Monroy Bracamontes. On October the 24th of 2014, Luis Enrique Monroy Bracamontes, a Mexican immigrant living in the U.S. illegally, went on a rampage that resulted in the death of 2 Northern California sheriff's deputies. He and his wife, Janelle Marquez Monroy, were in a car in the parking lot of a Motel 6 in Sacramento. Their vehicle was approached by Sacramento deputy Danny Oliver, aged 47. Bracamontes shot and killed Oliver with a 9mm handgun before he and his wife committed a series of carjackings. One motorist was shot in the head when he resisted but ultimately survived. The couple, both in their 30s at the time, crossed into Placer County. Bracamontes gunned down Deputy Michael Davis Jr. and seriously wounded Deputy Charles Bardo using an AR-15 assault rifle. The former's death tragically reflected that of his father, Michael Davis Sr., who was reportedly killed on a law enforcement job on the same day in 1988. Following a manhunt in the area, the couple were taken into custody. Bracamontes' ensuing trial will attract considerable media attention, in no small part due to his courtroom outbursts. Arguably the most terrifying of them occurred on the second day of his trial in January of 2018. Even though he'd entered a not guilty plea, Bracamontes began smiling and laughing in court as he admitted to killing the deputies. He also claimed that he felt no regret and said, "I will break out soon and I will kill more." As Bracamontes was escorted out of the courtroom, he told the jurors, "I am going to kill one of you." Later on, in another outburst, he launched a rant laden with 23 expletives at the judge and jury, as well as the dead cops and their stupid families. Bracamontes was convicted on 2 counts of first-degree murder with special circumstances and sentenced to death. Thanks for watching. Would you rather never drink again or have spent every weekend in a rehab facility? Let us know in the comments section below.